Following Victor Gyokeres' Premier League debut against Manchester United, in which critics described him as looking like a wildebeest on crystal meth, the internet was ablaze, with people accusing Arsenal of falling into an age-old trap. Buying from the Portuguese Primeira Liga. Social media erupted with people claiming that the Portuguese league needs to be investigated by UEFA. 28,000 likes on that, by the way, accusing it of being a money laundering scheme and describing it as a factory for frauds. It is clear that some of these are just humorous jabs, trolling and banter.
It was just banter.
But they are rooted in a serious allegation, also often articulated in more sincere terms. The performances and achievements in Portugal's top flight ought to be either outright dismissed, or at the very least treated with a great deal of skepticism, and that a great many, if not most, Portuguese exports, including even some of the league's star players, have proven to be very expensive flops. Primeira Liga skeptics don't just point to Gyokeres, of course, who it is worth emphasising has so far played one game for Arsenal, but also the likes of Darwin Núñez, who scored more goals in his last season at Benfica than he did in 3 at Liverpool, Carlos Vinicius, who won the Primeira Liga Golden Boot in his only season at Benfica, but scored just 8 goals in 53 Premier League matches for Fulham and Spurs. And who could forget about the so-called Dragon Slayer Islam Slimani, who succeeded only in slaying Leicester City's already remote chances of retaining the Premier League title, when he scored 8 goals from 39 Premier League appearances in total, off the back of bagging 30-plus goals in his final season with Sporting Club de Portugal. Wolves, meanwhile, were baited into parting with a club record-breaking £35 million for supposed wonder kid Fabio Silva from Porto, who has scored a grand total of 4 goals in 62 Premier League appearances, and in fact, none in his last 34. That's nearly £8 million a goal, before accounting for his wages. You can go back further still, to Man City's supposed centre-back solution, Eliaquim Mangala, who was a veritable car crash despite becoming one of the most expensive defenders of all time, Lazar Markovic, a forgettable £20 million flop at Liverpool, and maybe the most egregious example of them all, Gianelli Imbula, a man who somehow managed to look like he wanted to be in Stoke, even less than Michael Owen, after the Potters paid another club record €24 million to prize him away from Porto. Honestly, Porto want trying at The Hague. Heck, way back in 2003, Wolves forked out a potential £1.5 million, back when that was still considered a lot of money in football, for Portuguese international and supposed midfield sensation Silas, and Bolton swooped in to sign Brazilian international Mario Jardel for a similar fee, who had scored 67 goals in only 62 games for Sporting Club de Portugal. Between them, Silas and Jardel made a combined total of, drumroll please, ...16 Premier League appearances, and scored 0 goals. It's not just Premier League clubs who have had their fingers burnt. Mehdi Taremi scored 91 goals in 182 games for Porto, but just 1 in Serie A and 3 in all competitions, in his debut campaign with Champions League finalists Inter Milan last season. João Felix's performances for Benfica convinced Atletico Madrid to make him the 4th most expensive footballer of all time, but he could only muster up 34 goals in 131 games before being sold for a €72 million loss. And Jackson Martinez looked to be unstoppable at Porto, where he scored 92 goals in 136 games in 3 seasons, but he could only manage 3 goals in 22 games, following a €35 million switch to Atletico Madrid, who swiftly flogged him to China.
Let's say China.
China. China. China.
China.
China. China. China. China. China. China.
Then there is João Mario at Inter Milan, André Silva at AC Milan, and Renato Sanchez at Bayern Munich. The list seemingly goes on and on. So is it true then? And if so, why do so many clubs keep falling for it? Well, in what can only be described as a miraculous stroke of good fortune for you all, that is exactly what today's video is about. So sit back, relax, and join me on a journey to Portugal, which I spent 3 weeks exploring as research just for this video this summer, as we take a look at whether the Portuguese Primeira Liga really is a farmers' league, and what they are farming is frauds, why clubs keep pinning their hopes and dreams on West Iberian marksmen, and my hot take about Victor Gyokeres. I know, right? You wouldn't want to miss it. Throughout the introduction to this video, by my count, I mentioned 16 players signed from Portuguese Primeira Liga clubs, who were all varying degrees of bad and or underwhelming for their next clubs. None of those examples were inaccurate or untrue. I would never lie to any of you, but as with those collated by people attempting to belittle the Primeira Liga online, it was a highly selective list. So, that is to say, lying by omission. The reality is that for every Islam Slimani or Carlos Vinicius who struggle to score goals in the Premier League, there is a Diogo Jota or Raul Jimenez. Jota joined Wolves from Porto in 2017, where he scored a career-best 18 goals as Wolves won promotion in his debut campaign, and 9 goals in 33 games in his first season in the Premier League. Jota wasn't just prolific, as someone who never really operated as an out-and-out number 9, he was also highly effective in other areas, consistently ranking in the highest percentiles for his position in terms of progressive passes, progressive carries, touches inside of the opposition's box, tackles, interceptions and blocks. Since the start of the 2021-22 season, only Erling Haaland, Alexander Isak, Mohamed Salah and Harry Kane have had a better goals per minute ratio in the Premier League than Jota, who only scored 12 goals in his best season in Portugal. Raul Jimenez, meanwhile, only scored 18 goals in 80 games over the course of 3 years playing for Benfica in the Primeira Liga, yet he struck 13 times in the Premier League and 17 times in all competitions in his debut campaign with newly promoted Wolves. The following season, he scored a career-best 17 league goals and a whopping 27 in all competitions, exceeding anything that he had done in Mexico, let alone Portugal, which was one more than Sergio Aguero and only one fewer than Harry Kane in the league, while outscoring both in all competitions. A lengthy spell on the sidelines following a serious skull fracture was the only thing that could stop Jimenez from scoring goals, and even then, the 34-year-old still scored 12 goals in the Premier League and 14 in all competitions for Fulham last season. That is the same number as Liam Delap, who Chelsea signed this summer for £30 million. It is more than Dominic Solanke, who Spurs signed for a potential £65 million. And it is almost double Dango Uatara's output, who Brentford just signed for a club record £42.5 million from Bournemouth. It's not bad, is my point. And you would be hard-pushed to find a single Wolves fan who would describe either Jota or Jimenez as flops or frauds. They are, it should be said, far from the most notable examples. They are just among the most like-for-like comparisons with Slimani and Vinicius in terms of success stories. For all of the talk of a golfing class and needing time to adapt to the rigours of the Premier League, if anything, Bruno Fernandes only became more talismanic after leaving Sporting to join Man United, mid-season no less, meaning that he didn't even get the benefit of a pre-season to settle in or familiarise himself with his new teammates and surroundings. In his first half season, Fernandes scored 8 goals in 14 Premier League games and 12 in 22 in all competitions, and it is no exaggeration whatsoever to say that, aged 25, he immediately became the best player at the club, nor has anyone taken that crown from him in the almost 6 years since then. Ederson, similarly, joined Manchester City in the summer of 2017 as a 23-year-old goalkeeper, an age at which many keepers aren't yet even number ones, having only made 74 top-flight appearances in Portugal for Benfica and Rio Ave up to that point, yet he made an immediate transformative impact, enjoying an outstanding debut campaign at the Etihad, as Man City climbed from 3rd to 1st place in Pep Guardiola's 2nd season in charge. Now aged 32, Ederson has now played almost 400 games for the most successful club in English football since his arrival, lifting 6 Premier League titles, a UEFA Champions League, and 11 other trophies. Likewise, after falling to 2nd, an enormous 18 points behind Liverpool, having failed to replace Vincent Kompany in the 2019-20 season, Pep Guardiola dipped his toes back into the Portuguese market and brought in Ruben Dias in 2020, also from Benfica, as his new leader and colossus at centre-back. Also aged 23 at the time, Dias also made an instant impact, and that is putting things very mildly. He made the PFA Team of the Year and won the Manchester City Player of the Year, FWA Footballer of the Year, and Premier League Player of the Season awards, becoming only the 4th defender, alongside Nemanja Vidic, Vincent Kompany and Virgil van Dijk, to receive that accolade, as Man City regained their title by an emphatic 12 points, had the best defensive record in the division, and reached a Champions League final, all in his debut campaign. We can go back further still. Yeah, alright, not that far. Mario Jardel and Silas might have stunk the Premier League out as costly flops back in 2003, but in the exact same window, Manchester United signed Cristiano Ronaldo from Sporting, and he didn't do bad. Ronaldo won 3 Premier League titles and a Champions League in 6 seasons at Old Trafford, scored 42 goals in 49 games in his penultimate campaign, and won the first of his 5 Ballon d'Ors, before being sold to Real Madrid for a then world record-breaking £80 million fee, having been signed for just £12 million in 2003. 12 months after Ronaldo arrived in England, so too did his compatriot Jose Mourinho, fresh off the back of winning the Champions League with Porto. Mourinho brought with him both Ricardo Carvalho and Paulo Ferreira from Porto, both of whom went on to make more than 200 appearances and won a combined 22 trophies at Stamford Bridge. Ferreira became an outstanding servant to the Blues, spending 8 seasons in West London and retiring there in 2013, before becoming both an ambassador and assistant lone player technical coach for the club. Carvalho, meanwhile, played an integral role in Chelsea's record-breaking backline that only conceded 15 goals during his and Mourinho's first season at the club. He is one of the greatest centre-backs of the Premier League era, and when he left the club, it was to be reunited with Mourinho at Real Madrid in 2010. Elsewhere, the likes of Ruben Neves and João Palhinha both proved to be outstanding midfielders for Wolves and Fulham before being sold on for massive profits. Liverpool sold Luis Diaz to Bayern Munich for a €13 million profit following 3.5 years at Anfield this summer. And no Premier League defender has had more direct goal involvements than Pedro Porro since he joined Spurs from Sporting in January of 2023. Even Evan Nilsson, though it is still early days of course, hit double figures in his debut campaign at Bournemouth last season, following a club record move from Porto, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if he was a real revelation under Andoni Iraola this season. Those are just some of the players who have gone directly from Portugal to England. If we are going to include the likes of João Felix and Jackson Martinez in our critique of the potential pitfalls of signing players from Portugal, easy for me to say, then it would be remiss not to touch upon some of the Portuguese imports who have lit up La Liga over the years. Angel Di Maria, perhaps the most notable example, joined Real Madrid from Benfica, where he played a starring role for 4 seasons, especially, even though out of position in his last, before being sold for a huge profit to Manchester United. Brazilian centre-back Eder Militao slotted in seamlessly at Real Madrid, though still aged only 21, following a €50 million move from Porto in 2019. And 12 years before him, fellow Brazilian-born centre-back Pepe made the exact same move, going on to play more than 300 games for Real Madrid, forming one of the most formidable centre-back partnerships on the planet, alongside Sergio Ramos. Arguably most impressively of all, Colombian goal-getter Radamel Falcao required 0 time to settle in with Atletico Madrid, following a €40 million move in 2011, where he scored 70 goals in 91 games over 2 seasons, becoming quite possibly the best out-and-out number 9 on the planet, before making a shock move to Monaco. Falcao scored at almost an identical rate for Atletico as he had done for Porto. Away from the 2 Madrid clubs, Barcelona signed Deco, also from Porto in 2004, who was superlative in 3 out of his 4 seasons at the Camp Nou, where he won 2 La Liga titles and a Champions League, before looking equally impressive at Chelsea. And if you want to go back even further still, Luis Figo became the best player in the world in Catalonia, winning the 2000 Ballon d'Or following a €2.25 million move from Sporting to Barca, after which he infamously joined bitter rivals Real Madrid for a world record-breaking fee. Thankfully, Barca fans took the whole thing pretty well. Nor is it just La Liga. French clubs have had a field day with Primera Liga signings over the years, in part perhaps because there is less of a gap in terms of quality and certainly physicality between the 2 leagues than there is with, say, the Premier League or the Bundesliga. Rafinha lit up Ligue 1 with Rennes after Sporting decided to cash in on him, before also lighting up the Premier League with Leeds United and becoming one of the best players in the world at Barcelona. Rafael Leao's career ignited with Lille in Ligue 1 after he terminated his contract at Sporting due to a violent altercation with supporters at their training ground, and he has reached yet new heights following a €35 million move to AC Milan. And James Rodriguez and João Moutinho proved to be an inspired double signing by Monaco from Porto in 2013 for a combined €70 million. They sold Rodriguez on his own for €80 million after a single season. Meanwhile, Moutinho went on to play more than 200 games for Monaco, lifting the Ligue 1 title in the 2016-17 campaign. Most recently, of course, a trio of Portuguese imports, João Neves, Vitinha and Nuno Mendes, one from each of Portugal's big three, have become three of the best players in the world in their respective positions for arguably the best team in the world at PSG. Good luck convincing PSG supporters that they shouldn't sign players from Portuguese clubs. You've got a better chance of convincing Greg Wallace not to sexually harass women. In the Bundesliga, meanwhile, Luka Jovic, who couldn't get a kick at Benfica, scored 27 goals in 48 games in his second season at Eintracht Frankfurt, prompting a €60 million move to Real Madrid. That represented a €53 million profit in the space of just 6 weeks. Not bad then. Of the 100 biggest Portuguese Primeira Liga sales, I would say that 32 of them could be described as having been a roaring success for the purchasing club, so almost exactly a third. 44 could probably best be described as having done fine or it being too early to tell yet, and therefore 24, which includes the likes of João Felix, Eloquim Mangala and Lazar Markovic, could be described as having been total or at the very least partial flops. Even some of those, like Fabio Silva, could be deemed a little bit harsh, as Wolves are currently in the process of attempting to recoup $26 million of his £35 million fee amidst interest from Borussia Dortmund, but that would be my best estimate or summation. Yes, I did go through all 100 individually, and yes, this is what I call a job. It ain't much, but it's honest work. That's a hit rate of about 1 in 3 if you like, a meh, or too soon to tell rate of about 45%, and less than 1 in 4 Portuguese exports turning out to be total failures. Given that research by Dr. Ian Graham, Liverpool's former director of research, determined that approximately half of all transfers in football end in failure, the Portuguese Primeira Liga's numbers really don't look that bad. I thought that it might be interesting, therefore, to compare the Primeira Liga's 100 biggest sales with the Premier League's. The 3 biggest Premier League sales, for example, are Philippe Coutinho to Barcelona, Eden Hazard to Real Madrid, and Jack Grealish to Manchester City, though Moises Caicedo's move to Chelsea is likely to exceed Grealish's, subject to add-ons. If you were cherry-picking poor Premier League exports, as I did with Portugal in the introduction, you could also point to the likes of Diego Costa's catastrophic return to Atletico Madrid, Man City's wretched signing of Calvin Phillips from Leeds, and, way back when, Nicolas Anelka's ill-fated move from Arsenal to Real Madrid. On the flip side, you have also got the likes of Gareth Bale to Real Madrid, Luis Suarez to Barcelona, and Cristiano Ronaldo, again, this time to Real Madrid. By my count, overall, 23 of the Premier League's 100 biggest sales could accurately be described as having been, or so far, appearing to be, roaring successes. 57 could reasonably be viewed as pretty meh, or it being too early to tell, leaving 20 unmitigated disasters. That is slightly fewer disaster classes than the Portuguese Primeira Liga, considerably fewer major hits, and way more sales who fall somewhere in between. It's worth noting that the Premier League's biggest sales, unsurprisingly, are much more expensive than the Primeira Liga's biggest sales, with 6 €100 million plus sales, compared to just 2 in Portugal, the 50th most expensive Premier League sale costing €53 million, compared to €30 million in the Primeira Liga, and the 100th most expensive sale coming in at €35 million in the Premier League, compared to just €16.25 million in the Primeira Liga. It's also worth noting that there are far more internal sales within the Premier League. Whereas only a small number of the Primeira Liga's biggest sales were internal deals between Portuguese clubs, many of the Premier League's biggest sales, especially in recent years, have been transfers between Premier League clubs as a result of the growing financial supremacy and disparity of the Premier League in comparison to every other league. Past performance is not indicative of future results and all the rest of it, but historically speaking at least, the success rate of buying clubs has been higher when purchasing the most valuable players in the Portuguese Primeira Liga than England's Premier League. The conclusion from that wouldn't be that the Premier League is a farmers' league, signing Premier League players is a scam, or that the Premier League is a factory for frauds. At least not to any reasonable person. Just that there is considerable risk involved in almost all transfers. It is often hard for very expensive signings to exceed or even meet expectations, and many players find it difficult moving to a new club, often adjusting to a new league, language and culture, which comes with a unique set of challenges. Those ought to be more pronounced among Portugal's biggest sales, since they are much more likely to be leaving Portugal, and it perhaps helps to explain why Primera Liga players often find life easier in Spain and in La Liga than they do in England and the Premier League, where there are greater differences both on and off the pitch which make it more difficult to adjust, at least in the short term. Let's not twist facts. It is, of course, true to say that the Premier League is a much stronger, richer, and more competitive league than the Primera Liga, and so it follows that some players who flourish in Portugal will find it more difficult in England and/or Europe's other leading divisions. It is pretty much inarguable that for the vast majority of forwards, for example, they are going to find it easier to score goals in Portugal, where about 90% of people support just 3 teams, and about 75% of top-flight clubs have sub-10,000 attendances and are feeding off scraps, especially if they are playing for one of the big 3, than they are in the Premier League, where the team that finished 17th last season, 1 place above the relegation zone, had the 9th highest revenue in all of world football, above Atletico Madrid, Inter Milan, and almost 3 times literally the richest Portuguese club Benfica, and won the Europa League last season. None of this is particularly shocking or revelatory stuff. It's also reflected in the valuation of players. Had Victor Gyokeres scored 68 goals in 66 games over the last 2 Premier League seasons, winning back-to-back Premier League Golden Boots, then he would most likely be valued at over £150 million. That is a better rate of return than Erling Haaland, and he is only a couple of years older than him, and a much better rate of return than Alexander Isak, who we know that Newcastle value at well over £110 million. Because he scored 68 goals in 66 games over 2 seasons in the Premier League, however, and won back-to-back Premier League Golden Boots, Arsenal paid about a third of that, £55 million, rising to £63.5 million, subject to add-ons. It is quite obviously more difficult to stand out and score goals in England than it is in Portugal, but the response to that is to exercise caution, as should be the case with all transfers, not to just disregard an entire nation and league which ranks 7th in Europe, as per UEFA coefficient rankings. European pedigree, for example, is likely to be a greater indicator of ability to perform against stronger and more competitive opponents than domestic records or performances in Portugal, or at least as a useful additional indicator. Bruno Fernandes was a consistent standout for Sporting in Europe, making 18 goal contributions in 20 appearances in the Europa League before Manchester United signed him, winning the Man of the Match award in 30% of his Europa League outings. During the same season that Man United signed Fernandes in the January, he had already scored 5 goals and made 3 assists in only 5 Europa League appearances, winning the Man of the Match award in 4 out of those 5 games. Likewise, Ruben Neves became the youngest player to captain a team from the start of a game in the entire history of the Champions League at Porto as an 18-year-old, and he'd already made 20 appearances in Europe, still aged only 20, when Wolves signed him. It wasn't especially surprising that he looked out of place in the Championship, and right at home in the Premier League therefore. Manchester United, meanwhile, had first-hand experience of playing against Cristiano Ronaldo before signing him from Sporting, with several players telling Alex Ferguson after facing him that the club had to get the deal done. João Felix, by contrast, had only scored 3 goals in Europe, all of which had come in a single game against Eintracht Frankfurt. He'd only ever played 1 game in the Champions League, and he was yet to score and had only won 2 caps for Portugal when Atletico Madrid came calling. €126 million, it must be said, the 4th highest transfer fee, I'll just remind you, in the entire history of the sport, for someone who has won just 2 caps and hasn't scored an international goal yet, is insane. There's nothing specific to Portugal about that. It would be insane if they were in the Primera Liga, the Vanarama National League North, or in Serie A. Carlos Vinicius, to name another example, may have scored 18 goals in 34 league games for Benfica, winning the Primera Liga Golden Boot, but he only scored 1 goal in 8 games for them in Europe. Meanwhile, Islam Slimani scored 48 in 82 in the league for Sporting, but only 4 in 14 in Europe, so his output basically halved. And Mehdi Taremi struck 64 times in 122 league games for Porto, but only 11 times in 29 games in Europe, a less dramatic but nonetheless significant drop-off. It's not exactly fail-safe, but it's one of many useful indicators. The reality is that Portugal is one of the finest producers, and indeed developers of talent, anywhere in world football. It is home to 3 or 4 of the best academies on the planet, they frequently recruit expertly from Latin America, and the national team's depth, for a nation of only 10 million people, is nothing short of remarkable. It would be absurd to write off the combined talents of the entire nation and its league system on the basis of a few failed signings, which are not only to be expected of big money signings from any league, but which, upon further inspection, actually appear to have a very competitive success rate in terms of their cost-benefit analysis. As for Victor Gyokeres, my hot take is that he'll probably be just fine. He has already impressed in England, albeit in the Championship, and the real crime is that no Premier League club signed him in 2023, when he was available for €20 million, a price at which he was clearly a bargain. Arsenal have paid about a €45 million premium to sign a player who is 2 years older now, and will have to deal with far higher expectations as a £55 to £65 million European Golden Shoe contender from Sporting than he would have done as a €20 million punt from the Championship. I said punt, just so we're clear. Nonetheless, Gyokeres was very impressive in Europe for Sporting, scoring 11 goals in 17 games, and while he won't be able to bully players and dominate them airily to the same degree that he did in Portugal, which is a common problem that prolific Premier League strikers often face in England, he is familiar with the rigours of the English game, and he won't come up against too many tougher opponents than an in-form Matthijs de Ligt on the opening day of the season, without a proper pre-season of his own under his belt, and with little time to familiarise himself with the new players around him. Gyokeres isn't the daintiest or the easiest on the eye at times, but nor is Erling Haaland. I saw a clip the other day of Haaland struggling in a rondo session at Man City, or Piggy in the middle as we used to call it, where the technical gulf between him and most of his teammates appeared to be enormous, and, at times, he resembled a fan who'd won a competition. But Haaland is 6'5", as fast as lightning, his movement is brilliant, his first time finishing is lethal, and he is a Norwegian meat shield. It's for that reason that even Pep Guardiola is willing to put up with someone whose first touch is as dubious at times as Greg Wallace's conduct in the workplace. Gyokeres isn't as good as Haaland, almost no one is, but he is of a similar mould, and if Arsenal play to his strengths, and he can stay fit, then there's really no reason why he shouldn't be capable of hitting 20 plus goals this season, at least in all competitions. Oh no, that take was searing hot. Apologies to anyone who is now suffering third-degree burns as a result. I'll tell you what else is hot right now, so much so that Rita Ora can't stop singing about it. That's right, it's the Alfie Potsama YouTube channel. It's absolutely popping off at the moment, even though I haven't uploaded a new video for a little while, so why not head over there and subscribe to it, ready for the next one? All of the cool kids are doing it, and it's gotta be more fun than becoming a member of Greg Wallace's £11.99 male-only over 50s chat room. Surely. It's a high bar, I know. Thank you all as ever for watching anyway, I hope that you enjoyed today's video. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Do you think that the Premier League is a fraud factory or not? Yeah, let us know. Make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, as I say, not just for this channel, HITC Sevens, but also my second channel or sister channel, Alfie Potsama. You can now also support me additionally, should you be feeling extremely generous, and be able, don't do it if you can't afford to eat, would be my recommendation. But if you can, I'd say that should probably be the number 2 priority. Forget about the kids. You can do it either via heading over to the Alfie Potsama YouTube channel and becoming a channel member, or via buymeacoffee.com/Alfie Potsama, where you can do the same, but Google won't thieve around 30%, well, exactly 30%, I believe, off me. So that is preferable, but either is fantastic. You can also find me on various social media platforms, typically via the username @HITC Sevens, should you wish to do so for some reason. But that's all for now. I hope that you have an absolutely sensational day. I will see you next time. I love you all. Yes, even you. Take care out there. Cheers.